Yeah, let's ask Moiz on this. Moiz, how do you look at that? Well, how would, being an Islamic scholar, how would you explain that situation from your viewpoint?
Well, I would be almost in total agreement with Asif. I don't think I need to add anything on that. I believe that Hussein's Raziallahu anhu's action are in fact only corroborating the fact that for the purpose of aggression, collective aggression against any other collectivity, legal rule, the establishment of legal rule is a prerequisite. And it was for the very purpose that Hussein Raziallahu anhu was actually moving to Kufa. He had been invited to Kufa.
You mean he was going there to first to establish that rule?
And then to do whatever he was planning to do.
So it means he was going to establish a state or a rule within another rule?
You see, the way we would, again, as Asif has just pointed out, incidents in history can be interpreted in different ways. What I personally feel is that that was precisely what he was going to do. Now, would that have been a legal rule or not? That interpreting today will be very difficult, but I think that was precisely what he was trying to do.
And look back at that era, if I try to, this was not the era of UNO or any modern human rights and all those criterias. So when he was thinking of stepping out of and kind of one could say it was going to revolt against the state, and he did not stepped out of the Medina with no weapons and anything and moved with the family. You think he was not thinking in the perspective, the kind of scenario he could get into? Because at that time, any ruler.
That would be difficult for anybody to say whether he was expecting any resistance.
Because what I'm trying to get out of that, because that example is used a lot by the.
Clarify that he was actually not at that particular instance in Muharram when he left Medina for Kufa. He was actually not going to fight a war then. Right. I mean, not with his family and children. He was going to Kufa, and he was invited to Kufa. And for whatever purposes, that is again a matter of interpretation. Somebody can easily disagree with me. This is not a matter of, this is not how we would interpret the Sharia. Again, this is how we can justify or criticize an action of a particular person by looking at him from a particular perspective. What I feel is that the Sharia, from the Sharia, as Asif has pointed out, the three conditions which are generally agreed upon, which have been not generally, they have been agreed upon by a vast majority of Muslim scholars, and you can actually count the deviants on your fingertips probably. These three conditions, firstly of a legal rule established in a geographical land, which does not only have the authority of waging a war, but also implements all the laws. Whatever laws it interprets to be correct in Islamic, it can implement upon its people, upon its population. Secondly, that the fighting has to be declared. It has to be a proclaimed fight. It cannot be a covert activity against any other collectivity. And thirdly, the proclaimed fight cannot be in revocation, in a one-sided revocation of an established contract, even if there is a clear evidence of persecution in that piece of land. Because you see, the Quran says that one of the biggest reasons to declare a fight is to save people of a land from persecution. Yet, even if that is the case, and my state, for instance, is in a declared express contract with another state that we are not a no war pact, for instance, then even in the situation of persecution, I cannot declare a war unless the term of the contract is completed. So this is what the morality the Quran teaches us.
Okay, but there is one of the arguments that comes from the revivalist side is that they also agree more or less that most of the scholars of our ancient times, they agreed on this concept of state. But their argument is because the Muslim state was there, And now those scholars were never faced with the situation which we are in the present times, where an ummah state or a khilafah is not established, and at the same time we are being attacked from outside rulers. So the scenario has changed, and we have to reinterpret the concepts of jihad.
That's a very, very interesting question. But before I answer that, may I just refer to one point about the last argument on Hussein, if I may. I tend to agree with Moiz, because you see, we assume as Muslims that Hussein was a pious person, and had good intentions. We assume that as a Muslim about any other Muslim for that matter. But we must also assume that he was of a high degree of intelligence as well. Why would he take a few people with the intention of doing jihad against an empire? You know, and we know from historical records that he did have the intention of negotiating with the governor there. He had sent his delegate there, who was assassinated, by the way, and that is what started the whole trouble. So whether for pragmatic purposes or for religious ones, there is more evidence which can be adduced in favor of the argument that he would have sought legitimate legal political authority before even thinking of something like a jihad. So having said that, coming to this second point that you've raised about ijtihad and so on and so forth. Yes, this again, number one, from the perspective of the Muslim tradition, points out another digression. I wouldn't use the word deviation, but digression, that many of these revivalists that you're referring to, which does not include, by the way, people like Shah Waliullah, who was very much a revivalist, which does not include somebody like Shah Abdul Aziz. And I'll specifically refer to Shah Abdul Aziz for a particular reason, because if we talk about President Musharraf as not being the ruler of an Islamic state, maybe by some wild stretch of imagination it can be a debatable thing, but hardly anybody could debate about the British Empire. And during the times of Shah Abdul Aziz, the British Empire was the East India Company and so on and so forth. They were virtually the rulers here. It was Shah Abdul Aziz, who's the son of Shah Waliullah and a big name in Indian history, who pointed out that the Muslim rule is over. He gave a fatwa, which has now been translated both into English and Urdu, and can be read by ordinary people as well. And he gave a fatwa and said, look, the Muslim rule is over, so let's not pretend that it is not. And if it is over, then what is the status of this land? Is it Darul Kufr vis-a-vis the classical paradigm of Darul Kufr versus Darul Islam dichotomy? And if it is, then should we migrate? Now this is a question, or should we go to some other land and reform ourselves and wage a war? And he came up with this construct, which was a landmark in the history of Islamic discourse. He said, look, if these people, and by the way, Shafi had referred to something similar much earlier with his concept of Darus Sulah, with certain conditions which I can refer to if you would like to talk about them. He said, and I'm referring to Shah Abdul Aziz now, he said, look, if these rulers do not stop you from proclamation of your faith, do not stop you from proclaiming yourselves as Muslims, they do not stop you from following your basic rituals as Salah, as Zakah, and as Saum and Hajj and so on and so forth, do not stop you from holding your Jummah, do not stop you from following your own law in your personal matters, then if nothing else, they are not representatives of Darul Kufr. You can stay here and you should follow their laws.